been provided as is required by Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, with respect to the Home News Tribune to publish the same. This announcement must be entered into the minutes of this meeting. For those attending the meeting today, please be aware that the board meetings are recorded via audio. Maria?
Chairman Engel,
Here.
Commissioner Franklin,
Present.
Commissioner Katz,
Here.
Commissioner Moskowitz,
Here.
Commissioner Jallo.
Here.
In the event that we have no ballots to inspect, we are going to accept them. Well, we got to do, I guess, commissioner comments. Any commissioner comments?
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to reconsider our decision in the Monroe ballot matter.
Right now? Today?
Yes, I'd like to make that motion now.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Discussion? All right, so,
Discussion.
Actually, I don't want to throw a monkey wrench into it. It's had to think about it, but in the bylaws, under Robert's rules,
Yeah.
someone who I believe is on the positive end of the motion has to make that motion. We were, that's right, sorry.
I checked Robert's rules as
Sorry,
well.
got it.
And
You
I
got it.
voted yes in favor
Yes,
of
got
it.
it,
So
got it.
I'm the one asking for the reconsideration. And my reason is I've thought about this a lot, and it is a very big deal to take away the votes of 181 people. And I was very receptive to the arguments that were made. I tried to weigh them, and which is why I made decisions that I made at the time. But it just did not sit well with me, the thought of disenfranchising 181 people who's, that's the most important thing that we have in this country is our right to vote. And this is due to no fault of their own. It's a procedural hurdle. So I started to look up, the rules with regard to that. And the chain of custody argument, in my opinion, there are other things to consider. There was one factor that existed there, and that was the fact that it wasn't completely sealed. But there are things that we could do on our end, and information that we could obtain or get to establish chain of custody. And so I think taking such a terminal measure to throw out the votes of 181 people was just, was maybe too much at the time. It hasn't sat well with me, and I would like to change my vote to no vote and count the 181 votes.
Any other comments?
Was there
Was there a second? I'm sorry, was there a second or?
of the original thing?
No, was there a second for the motion?
Yes.
Yes. Future second.
So, I don't think anyone here doesn't want to count those votes. I think sitting on this board, no one here, we go to great strides to make sure that people's votes are counted. I think from procedural, this has been something that the board has taken a stand on since I've been on the board. And I guess I have the most tenure on the board. I do not like doing it. I find it, as you do, you took great thought and we're disenfranchising voters. Maybe I have a twist. Because we as commissioners, I think, would all agree that we'd like to see those votes counted. Why don't we do a twist and make a motion to a judge? Why don't we go to a judge and ask him? Why don't we make a judge make the decision? Because we're supposed to follow what the law is. So to vote no, not to open, is what the law says. All I'm saying is, I want to see those votes counted. I believe they were disenfranchised. I believe everything that you said. But I feel as my duty as a commissioner that I'd have to vote at this point to not open them up. And I don't want to do that, but that has been consistent what I voted for. So why don't we do something, because my experience has also told me that judges, in front of a judge, judges also don't want to see things disenfranchised. I think judges are presenting a case to them, and that can be presented any time. to count, the judge can make that decision. So I would say, as a twist, I would say I'd like to present it to the judge. Now, I know you made a motion, and I understand that. So, and I hear you. But I think going in front of a judge, making that plea that you made here, whether we make it, whether our attorney makes it, whether whatever who makes the discussion, I would feel more comfortable as a commissioner to do that, and I would fight for those disenfranchised voters.
If I may.
Yes.
And you know, every person has to vote with their own conscience. I completely respect that. I don't necessarily have the benefit of, and I completely respect that, of saying, you know, this is something we've done in the past, and using that as the reason of being consistent, and those are all very good arguments. And I believe I weighed that when that argument was made last time. I believe I weighed that, and I think I weighed it too heavily. I was not here in the past, and if I'm looking at this as is, and based on my understanding of the law, where, you know, these are sealed envelopes, these are sealed ballots, there is a chain of custody, there are, you know, we can obtain the information as to how they got from point A to point B. I don't think that the law is as rigid as to make the determination that we, as Board of Commissioners, have to throw the ballots out. I don't agree with that interpretation of the law, and so based on that, I would like to change my vote.
Any further discussion?
Yes. This has been an upsetting decision that we've made every year consistently because of the chain of custody. If with the seals unbroken, with the seals broken, a ballot could have been pulled out, multiple ballots could have been pulled out. It's more difficult to add ballots because they have to come from somewhere. But especially for provisional ballots, they could essentially become untraceable if they're pulled out of the bag. And then what do you got? And it's been a fraud issue, and that we've been consistent in terms of doing that. I abhor disenfranchising voters, especially disenfranchising voters for what is probably some election official in our instance, the people that we hire as poll clerks of the state. That's really is indeed abhorrent, but it's our responsibility to maintain the integrity of the election. And to the extent that there's a break in the chain of custody, and there is if the seals are missing, then it's not something that I can accept. It's not something. This has been our consistent position for years, and this was only 3 ballot bags. We've had, what, 26 or 29 bags in various parts around the county, and we've punished the poll clerks. I think we gave them some notice and some of it, and then we punished them, especially anybody that I think we did it twice. They were out, period. The Board of Elections equivalent of capital punishment, in that we never worked as a poll clerk again in Middlesex County. But
Have we ever taken testimony as to the chain of command, like in the past?
No, chain of custody?
Chain of custody, I mean?
No, but there's not, but the seal was broken somewhere, right?
Right. But I don't know that that's a terminal, you know, outcome. I mean, there are other factors or facts that could be presented to the Board of Commissioners that can make us as a body make a determination one way or another before going to a judge. It's not just a terminal outcome. Hey, a seal's, I mean, that's not my rendition of reading the law, and my interpretation was that that's not necessarily terminal. We must throw these out on that basis. There's other reasons and rationale for which we could say, and in this instance, you know, chain of custody has been established. We see that there's nothing wrong. These envelopes are sealed. They are verified, and they're valid in that. And our ability, and us being the first step in the system to weigh these factors, can say, hey, the votes of 181 voters supersede, you know, this one small violation out of the potential issues that may exist.
How do we know that no ballots were pulled out? And if you say you can take testimony or hearing, now? Are we going to try to call in all the poll books that were involved in the 3 districts to satisfy ourselves, 3 polling locations, satisfy ourselves that that was the situation?
Well, if that's a question, I think that that's more,
And when we had 29 bags, should we have called in poll clerks in 29 polling locations?
I think the rights of voters to have the right to vote, it's incumbent upon us to take such steps. I think it's that important. I know, this is what I thought, right? And you know, if I'm a voter, which I am, but if my ballot was in there, like, I would be mortified. I'd be mortified with the system, I'd be mortified with everything, just because it wasn't sealed. I mean, what about all the other factors? What about the change? I don't believe we were even given enough facts to make a decision one way or another, and I think having not been given all the facts of the chain of custody, which is what is at dispute here, I can only vote, you know, to keep them.
Commissioner Moskowitz, you have something?
Thank you. No, I had been thinking about it as well, only if you all recall, I even apologized at the end for the vote because I was going along with what I believed was the sacrosanct portion of the laws, indicating we cannot, with any adjudication, accept any of those. Even though at the time, if you recall, there had been a handwritten note indicating that there had been a problem with the lock originally, but the person still signed it saying that they should receive it. Yeah. And nothing at the time.
Actually, I think the note said that when they signed it, that it was missing. So
I mean,
something was missing sometime during the day, which is also a chain of custody issue. It's in there, but no one was, somebody did something. Somebody
He said
broke
something
off,
with the
somebody broke off a seal.
Right.
And when they broke off a seal, did they also, we take something in there out of the bag when no one was looking? I don't know. We
No,
don't know.
but what we do know is that the person who was responsible for that bag was concerned enough to make a note about it to send to us.
So the
That's
issue-
number one.
so the
Number
issue
two,
there-
the only
Yeah,
other thing, as you were saying, please, is that these were bags that contained the provisionals and, I think, some of the emergency ballots. Dan, is that correct?
I don't know what was in the 3.
We don't even know.
Point this
But-
out, it was never signed. We didn't know who the poll workers were.
But it was a provisional bag that I believe all of
So
the
this wasn't signed, and this has.
emergency went into. You know, so I don't know. I'm happy that you looked it up and have come back with some indication, because I've been quite concerned about those votes as well, and not having them
In
counted.
terms of chain of custody, this one wasn't even signed.
Signed.
Yeah.
And number two, my question was going to
So that's
be,
just the 3 that were.
We
I mean,
then
I
vote-
hate to be
do
arguing
we
on
vote
this.
again tonight? We do not base any of the numbers on the fact when the full board was here, but all the commissioners were here? If we vote on this again? What, do we go back to the original vote?
No, it's a
Just
new
for
motion.
tonight? a
Well,
new
it's a motion to reconsider, so you need a majority of the people
Tonight,
tonight to say, yes, we should reconsider. And
Okay.
if we reconsider, then you make a decision on the bags.
again, so it's another motion.
So
Okay.
since Commissioner Jones changed his vote, that makes it
Well,
a 3-3.
I didn't do it yet.
I know,
he's-
you
I said I
said
would.
you would.
On the original vote.
Assuming the motion to reconsider the vote is passed, then he has
That's correct.
declared that if we do that, then he'll change his vote when we hear it. But
And what about the suggestion that Commissioner Franco had to take it to the judge and let him make the decision?
the only thing I can recall,
That would be another motion.
yeah,
Like the current motion on the table is a motion to reconsider.
yeah.
Yes.
The only thing I can tell you was that there was it last year? When was it Sayreville? Was that last year?
2 years ago.
2019, very close election in Sayreville. It went to an election contest. There were multiple bags of ballots that were, I don't know exactly the number, that were not sealed. 6 that were not sealed. And the judge, there's 2 different pieces. As my understanding is, the judge did not order that the ballots be counted and included, but the judge did order that the ballots be open and looked at and the votes recorded for what it's worth. And he would have to go to the next point as to whether he would count them or not, I believe, because they didn't help the candidate that was behind them who brought the things, so it didn't make any difference, it wouldn't have changed the result of our county.
I
And
don't
I
know
don't
if it'll
think
make
this will
any,
either,
I don't know if
right?
it'll make any difference here. I'm not concerned, and
Right.
I'm not concerned about what's missing
Exactly.
from the bag. I'm concerned that there are 181 that are in there, and those people's vote meant nothing. And I can't find myself to say that that's, and I'm not saying anyone is, but that's not insignificant. That's, you know, that's something that is important to me, to make sure that those votes are counted. And, you know, like I said, I relied on, you know, and I appreciate the experience in the past history, but I'm not bound to that. And so, you know, my decision would be based on, you know, allowing people allowing those sealed votes to be counted.
But
When
think
that
about,
exists.
I'm sorry, and may I?
And I won't speak again on before the vote.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I just didn't mean to interrupt you
No
as well,
problem.
but thinking about the entire process of the voting, which again is what I went back to when I left here, so it's comforted. So many things don't fall into the normal rules, that we did have emergency ballots out before we knew for sure that we weren't. You understand, so many circumstances would have prevented normalcy coming back and us absolutely having to stick with those rules in this instance. I do not believe we set another precedent by reconsidering it this time because of the unusual circumstances of the whole election. That's what I would state.
Whatever happens here in terms of votes, et cetera, should it be determined that you're going to reconsider it and accept them, we need to decide before another election, so it's done on a nonpartisan basis, or bipartisan basis, as to what our procedure or agreement would be going forward
Correct.
for open bags. If we decide, if it's ultimately determined to change this from what the policy and the procedure is regarding chain of custody.
Why don't we reach out to the Attorney General and get a ruling from him? Going forward, I'm talking about. Jack, you said.
I'm willing to bet that we're going to get back. It doesn't.
Discretion of the board.
It's at the discretion of the board.
Right, exactly.
But we'll see.
And that just makes the timing different. I'd rather,
Okay, I have nothing else to say before we vote on the motion to reconsider.
okay. So we're voting on the motion to reconsider the responses to accepting the
How do the
ballots.
commissioners feel about going to the judge, though? We haven't even talked about that.
I'd like my motion to be heard first, and then we can discuss other options. I do have thoughts that might be consistent with what Commissioner Katz said with regard to going forward as well, but before we do that, I'd like this motion to be voted on one way or another.
That would really be, that would be appropriate. Yes, correct. Methodology. Is it Colonel Roberts or General Roberts?
Both, actually.
Really?
Well, because you get it.
Hold off if you want until Monday,
When is Commissioner Benjamin coming back, you know?
but then you'd have to
After
ask
Monday.
Commissioner,
Monday?
No, I think she's coming back
if
Tuesday.
there's Mr. Jala to withdraw his motion, then she gets her judgment if he wants to.
I mean, Commissioner Benjamin was here when we took the first vote. I think it's unfair to take the vote now without her being here. My opinion. Couldn't we hold off?
This motion has to go forward. The motion as to ultimately what to do could wait till Monday.
Well, she won't be here Monday either.
Okay.
Tuesdays.
But then,
That's mute.
When is she coming back? On, you know?
Tuesday, I think.
Tuesday?
Yeah. Well, she would be back. I don't know if she's coming back late Monday or whatever it is, so she wouldn't be able to get to the hearing.
She wouldn't be here for 4 o'clock. Okay. So I guess we vote then.
To reconsider.
So again, could I ask
Sure.
that you repeat the motion, so I understand
Yes,
completely.
motion to reconsider the board's position to reject the ballots from the Monroe provisional ballots, the three in question.
So your motion is to reject the decision to...
No, it's,
It's a motion to reconsider under
it's a
Robert's
motion,
rules.
it's
That's
a
the only-
motion, if this is passed, then we would proceed to essentially to a vote as to whether we accept or reject the ballots.
It's in essence reopening.
It's just reopening reopening the decision. It's a procedural thing which would be necessary, but it's a procedural part that would be necessary in order to decide again whether we accept or reject the ballots that were whether the unsealed ballot boxes.
So the first vote is to reconsider.
Yes.
The second vote.
If there's a yes vote, it means then it's back on the table as to whether or not we reconsider. the
Right,
ballot.
conceivably, I could have said, I'd like a motion to reconsider, not get a second, and we would have moved on. Or I got a motion to reconsider, got a second, a vote says no, and then we move on. But if the motion to reconsider is accepted, then the next question would be whether there's a motion to reject or accept the ballots.
Okay, Maria, you got that?
Yes. Okay. Chairman Engel,
To reconsider, yes.
Commissioner Frankel,
Yes?
Commissioner Katz,
No.
Commissioner Moskowitz,
Yes.
Commissioner Jello,
Yes.
So now,
Second motion, who's making the motion? Commissioner Jones.
Yes. To make the motion to
Make
accept,
your motion
to accept.
to accept the ballots, the provisional ballots from Monroe.
Maria?
There has to be a second for that.
Oh, yes.
I'll second.
Okay. Chairman Engel,
Wait.
Wait,
Can there be
no,
discussion now?
discussion.
Can there be discussion?
Discussion.
The one issue.
You want first, or you want...
Yeah, I'll do one part of it. It's for, I really hate it, but to be consistent, and the chain of custody issue is a very important issue. I really could not change my vote. Commissioner Frankel's thing in terms of sending it to a judge, just to be aware of this, I believe it only goes to a judge in the event that there's a typo. And I'm not sure whether an abstention is an abstention. I haven't looked at Robert's rules, quite frankly. I'm not sure whether an abstention counts as part of the vote, as part of a negative, whether it counts as a negative or whether it doesn't count at all. Do you
In this instance, it
recall?
wouldn't count. I don't think
Okay.
at all.
I just don't.
It's not a
I didn't
supermajority.
bring Robert's rules with me. I didn't think that was going to be an issue.
But obviously you are familiar with the rules that we follow here in terms of and the bags
Yeah,
and the
well,
procedures that do or do not,
Yeah, well,
could or
I
could
think
not
in
be
this, I don't know if I
considered.
misspoke, but I think an abstention would be a no vote in this instance. I don't know if that's
Can you
what I said.
repeat that?
I think an abstention would be a no vote in this instance.
which if that were the case, then there's no way it would get to the judge because it would, no matter, we have an odd number of people here.
Well, I'm a little,
Unless someone wants to walk out of, and there's only a quorum of 4 people, so there's only a vote of 4 people, there's always a way to get this.
so I'm a little confused because the commissioners asked that we talked about the ballots at the back of the voting machines. Okay, that they were making sure that every vote counted, and every vote was looked at, and we had to go to a judge in order to open up the back of the machines. That wasn't based on a 3-3 or 2-2 vote whatsoever.
Well, that wasn't necessary to count the votes. It was,
Well-
the court order was to take the ballots out of the machine.
Right.
There was no decision to count them.
No.
Did we count them?
No.
Did we count them?
We did, we don't have the court order yet,
Okay.
so.
I mean, because it's a court order to open up the machine, it's not a question.
It's not a question to count, I understand that.
Discrepancies that existed that I kept thinking about this entire time, commissioners, is what will probably guide my vote tonight in agreement. We had differing choices to use the emergency, differing places, differing submissions, differing counting. With all of that saying, we should be counting whatever votes we do have. Because those persons with the emergencies were placed in this, is that the normal rule that emergency ballots would go in the provisional bag?
No.
No, right?
Emergency
Exactly.
ballots, the
So-
law for emergency ballots provides that they be counted at the polling place, not the polling place.
Thank you. So the point I'm getting at is, we don't know how many emergency ballots are in those bags.
But there's also a way,
And we would definitely have, and so that you're discounting people that had nothing to do with it. You understand? That's just been rolling. And I apologize, because I know you know the laws and everything, and how difficult it was. But there was just so much there that I think, yeah, what? And we still have to review the actual ballots,
It's
but,
actually never going to be that. That's-
you know, the fact that one person had a signature, one person did not, we're gonna throw out the no signature, we're gonna keep, there was just so many things that to zero in on this one, I don't think would be smart. Well, I'm just not comfortable with it, so I appreciate our being able to reconsider that.
Any further discussion?
the only way Commissioner Frankel's suggestion can work is if we have a tie vote. The only way we can have a tie vote if negative, if a abstention counts as a negative, is if one commissioner vacates the room, so we only have 4 commissioners, which is a quorum present in the room. We'd have to have a tie for those purposes if we did that. I'm not saying we should, I'm just saying that that's what it would be.
Well, I don't feel so good right now. How's that?
Well, I don't think any of us feel good. This whole, the concept of rejecting.
I think it's the fairest way to go.
Yeah, the concept of rejecting ballots because of an error at some level of election official is very, very, very disturbing. But the concept of ballots not having a chain of custody, being a broken chain of custody for ballots, which gives you a potential fraud issue, clearly, is also very disturbing. And the board over 1998, 2000, you were in 2000, when were you out? You were about 2000, 96? The board for now a quarter century has taken the consistent position that if there's a break in the chain of custody, of course we didn't even have provisional ballots then.
No, we didn't.
All right. Well, since we've had provisional ballots, the board has taken a consistent policy in terms of this. So if we did this, we can't go back and redo any elections for the last 15 years. But what we'd be doing now would be an impact. It would have been an impact on what was done and the total results over that period of time.
Madam Chair, can a member of the public be heard?
Excuse us, there was a question.
Can a member of the public be heard on this issue before they take the vote?
Pardon?
Me? Can I be heard on this
Yes.
issue before?
Well,
vote's
we're
taken?
having a discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We'll call on
I
public
think-
next.
I make a motion for
I would allow
public
the
discussion.
public to this.
So you second my
Before-
motion for,
I don't even think
Well, it is,
that
it's
it's
a-
just a procedure. When you're talking about motions that the public is concerned about, I always prefer that we allow the public to speak before we have to vote.
I second.
So,
You can do that.
Okay. Just 2 points.
State your name and address.
I'm
please.
sorry. William Earthgrave, 75 Livingston Avenue, Roseland, New Jersey. I am an attorney, a special counsel to the Middlesex County Democratic Organization. Just 2 points if I could. First, to Commissioner Katz's point about what has gone on in the past. I recognize that. I probably appeared in front of this board and made similar arguments to what Commissioner Katz was saying. But I'm also a big believer in that if we made an error in the past, let's not compound it by continuing to make it going forward. But perhaps I candidly reviewed this issue. I have no ability to review these ballots. I can't bring an action under the election statutes because I need to say it's going to change the result of the election, and I don't think there's enough ballots here to change the result of the election. That notwithstanding, given the current climate, I know my client is very concerned about the perception that votes are being tossed away. So perhaps, and I don't know if this, I'll leave the Robert's Rules argument to the board, but perhaps one of the things to do is to make a motion to set aside those ballots, review them, count them, take the ones that are valid. I'm saying you still have to go through the process, as Commissioner Moskowitz indicated. You're not going to take a ballot that doesn't have the proper identification, that isn't from an authorized voter, that is open, those things. But the chain of custody, at least as to the ballots that are still in the bag, and I understand Commissioner Katz's point that maybe there's ballots taken out of the bag, but the ballots that are in the bag that are still sealed and have all the proper credentials, at least you know they are valid. Those can be opened and counted. Whether you accept them into the count of the election could be a separate question, but at least you'll know what those votes were, and you'll have those votes. Whether you add them to the totals or don't add them to the totals, I think that would be a separate vote of the board. But that may be a way to deal with the issue, and that's my view of it. But whatever we do, in my view, and in my client's view, is that we want to add more integrity and take away as many questions as we can from elections because of the current climate and the current temperature that we have in the world, and all the noise that's circulating about elections. So with that, I thank the board for hearing me.
I do have to mention that that has not been your client's position over the period of time where we've done that.
And Commissioner, and I think I prefaced my comments.
Yeah, no, I know that.
I think
Yeah.
I said, I
No,
started
I
that
know
I
that.
was in the same position you were on numerous occasions, but I'm also going to repeat my point that I see no reason, if an error's been made in the past, to compound that error.
Is there an error? Is there an error? Is there something in the election law that
Commissioner,
requires
I'm not
us to-
here to debate, sir.
No, I'm
telling you
listen.
what we want to do is we want to do what we can to add some more comfort in the voting public, as Commissioner Jolly has indicated several times, that if you voted and your vote wasn't counted because of a mistake somebody else made, that's irritating and it's difficult. So if there's a way that we at least know what the vote was, and you could take a separate vote, and if someone feels the need, they can bring an election contest later, if they've got them, then it's all done. And maybe we even save some time by not bringing, by having the vote at least counted. Then, if there is a candidate who feels aggrieved, they'll know what the count will be. And the question will then solely be, will they, will it change the results of the election? And that, I think, is important to know.
I don't know if we have the authority to segregate and count these ballots and not include them in the thing. I think that's an
What do you mean?
issue.
I was segregating them from the total count.
I can call you Bill, right?
Please.
Okay.
From the total
It's the
count.
nicest thing I've been called today.
Well, I've been called a lot worse than my name, but the issue with counting, segregating and counting them, I don't know if we have the authority to do that.
Do not, so the question is, we still have a position that we have to decide.
Yeah, I'm just,
We're gonna
because
vote
that
on
was,
it.
we had a.
That was another
that was-
suggestion.
That was comments from the, from the public.
Right.
Comment from the, from the public who has a lot of election law experience, which is.
We can certainly find out.
Yeah, but I think we should find out before we do that.
Any of you gentlemen like to speak?
Yes, I would like to speak.
Carly, would you like?
My name is Scott Snyder. I'm at 438 Hopkins Station Road, Monroe. I'm the vice chair of the Democratic Party in Monroe. My viewpoint on this, and I should say our viewpoint on this, is that the election is a contest between qualified candidates who duly file and go through the primary process or file petitions as an independent candidate in elections. It is my understanding on Tuesday the Republican candidates in Monroe Township, which is the only level of election that could potentially numerically be affected by these ballots, all the Republican candidates spoke in favor of opening these ballots and having them counted. I also know that I forwarded a letter from the Democratic candidates, all 5 Democratic candidates in Monroe Township, pleading with the board to reconsider and do the same. And so my question would be, or my point would be, while in the past you may have voted based solely on the chain of custody, where a contest would have been affected and the parties did not agree as to whether or not the ballot should be open, in this case the parties do agree. They want to get the ballots counted. And so I think that fact in and of itself separates us from past actions. I think some of this should be considered. I'll also point out that 2 years ago, when the Sayreville bags were of issue, there were a plentiful amount of ballots, enough to swing the election, and there was a guarantee that a party would have the right to bring a court action. That is not guaranteed in this situation. When that court action was brought, both parties in court agreed to have the ballots counted, and therefore the judge ruled to have them counted.
My understanding is what was agreed in Sayreville, or either that the judge determined that they would be counted for what they're worth, not necessarily counted in account, included in account.
I mean,
And it became moot when they were open because it wasn't necessary because it wouldn't have taken.
I certainly would not want to parse the words with you, sir. But I do recall that situation well, and I know that both parties to that court action, again, as with this, agreed that the ballot should be tabulated in some form. And so I would ask that the board consider voting yes, as to the point that the councilor made before. This is not where we want to be, especially now in this country, right now. The system needs to be sacrosanct. And if people showed up and took the time and dealt with the frustrations of the polling books and everything that happened on election day morning, and even stuck around long enough to then fill out a paper ballot, which my understanding wasn't even present at the beginning when they showed up, to have that properly filled out and sealed, and to then not have their vote counted, I think would be the wrong decision to make.
You want to speak? Charlie?
Yes, Charles Cradaville from New Brunswick, editor of New Brunswick Today, community newspaper, available online, newbrunswicktoday.com. I wanted to ask if you could just say which polling places these are from. I'm not clear on which 3 bags we're talking about.
I don't have my,
Yeah, Sylvia.
Sylvia has it.
Brookside School, Clearbrook Cultural Center, Monroe EMS.
Okay. I guess my only thought on this would be there's potentially video cameras in these locations that may have captured the entire day and could be reviewed, see if there was any funny business, anything to be concerned about, and then make a decision based on that, if it's available, could be a helpful piece of evidence. And I do want to just say, thank you to Commissioner Giallo for opening this discussion and reconsidering. I think he's proving that it's a good thing that there's new board members and more perspectives. And I agree that we don't have to keep doing things the same way just because that's how they were done before. So I'm pleased to see this discussion happening, and wish you all the best.
That's it. There's one question I haven't heard an answer to. Who transported the provisional ballot container to the clerk's office? Do we know? Because, they're very hard to handle. I can't see senior citizens carrying them.
And who transported them from the clerk's office to here.
To hear, yeah.
Usually it's police officers.
Yeah, but
Please.
but we're talking about in sealed things.
Right.
So we have a whole series of spots, so, I mean,
That's one question. Is
I
Tom
would,
still here?
I mean,
And,
I would say one of the things that we can do, and I don't think we're gonna necessarily get an answer by Monday, or whether we're gonna get an answer, we're gonna get a non-answer, is ask the Attorney General whether, in fact, we can accept ballots from something with the chain of custody is missing. I think they're gonna say that it's gonna be the discretion of the board. If we're surprised and they say something else, then we at least have an idea. So I would suggest that we consider holding the motion until Monday, asking the AG to see if we have an answer to that question in terms of authority to do that. And if I'm actually surprised and they actually take a position, then we'll have the answer already. If we're not, we're no worse off than we're doing today.
I don't think that the only factor in chain of custody is the seal. And I think, like the speaker suggested, that in 2021, there are so many things at our disposal to help us determine chain of custody, to help us determine if there's anything that happened negative to the ballot. I mean, they are sealed. They're it was not provided to us the information that I would have liked to have asked. I would have liked to ask all those questions. The locks on the bag, all the other things that are there and are safe, that exist. It seemed, my assumption from not hearing that there was any other thing that was wrong was that everything else went right, and that it was just this fatal flaw that meant that 181 people who showed up and did everything right on their end, ballots didn't count. And I don't know that that's the way that it should be. I don't know that that's the way the law is. That's certainly, unless I'm told otherwise by an Attorney General, that's how I intend to go forward in support of and erring on the side of voters getting the opportunity to vote. There was once a suggestion made today about having a judge hear it, but again, that would be moot if all parties are in favor of it. I mean, everyone who has a vested interest says count the votes. I don't see why we should do otherwise, in my opinion.
And did you want to?
Commissioner Moskowitz?
Thank you, I'm sorry. I think we've all been thinking about it since we made the decision, and the one thing I'm absolutely certain on Robert's rules is if I say call the question, we vote. Is that not correct?
It is.
Sounds good to
Thank
me.
you. I apologize, but that's where I believe we've had that time, and let's vote.
And the motion?
Well, the motion is whether we can reconsider it. It's not a question of whether we can it yet. So that's just a procedural motion until we get to that.
We already did the motion.
We did reconsider.
We reconsider.
Oh, that's right, I'm sorry.
Now it's
I
the motion to-
apologize.
no
I
problem.
apologize.
Reconsider.
Okay.
We're
My
reconsidering
mind
that.
is getting to be a little mushy.
The motion
Can
is
somebody repeat
to
the
count,
motion?
yes, the motion is to count
The ballot,
provisional ballots
after it.
after review, yes.
Roll call, Maria?
Chairman Engel?
Yes to count.
Commissioner Franklin?
No.
Commissioner Katz?
No.
Commissioner Moskowitz?
Yes,
Commissioner Jello?
Yes.
Any further comments? Somebody came in late? No? Yeah?
I'm just trying to figure out what
Oh,
you guys were
okay.
talking about.
Okay. Before we proceed on this part, I would request, and Maria will put it in the minutes on a future meeting, to do two things. One, confirm with the Attorney General whether there's any opinion about whether what we're doing here tonight is something that we can do. And second with them, whether they have any suggestions as to what to do if we do decide to do it for purposes of chain of custody, for that part. And then if they say, if as I expect we'll get back is, it's in discretion of the board, then prior to the next election, we have to determine what procedure we want to take, because it's going to be there's going to be bags that come back, or ballot boxes that come back with missing seals forever, likely forever, because we get some of it every year, and that decision should be made if we're going to change the decision that we have. It's got to be made before, when we don't have an election in place, so we're all fair in terms of what we feel we should do.
I agree with that. I would love to be part of any subcommittee or whatever to kind of, or, discuss what other factors exist in determining the chain of custody, what information should be presented to us, not just, telling us this is the only information we have, but, what information can be presented to us to make us make a more holistic determination as to whether or not the chain of custody has been broken.
And the fact that we had so many unusual circumstances throughout the election from 6 in the morning until the end that we normally have not had, that has to be considered too, quite frankly.
Well, there's a whole series
That weighed heavily on my decision, Commissioner.
There's a whole series of things from this election that we will have to discuss, because there are many things that were wrong with it that were in no way within our control. And there were some that were within the control at some level of the counties, and some that may be essentially self-inflicted wounds. So we have to decide, we have to sit down and discuss that, because there are holes that may have to be plugged. There are questions about what has to be fixed, so to the extent possible, these things don't happen again. It's not for this meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Well, is there any?
No, everybody, you're going to speak again?
I would like to.
3 minutes.
I kind of think I should get the full 5, because that was a separate issue. My comments were restricted to that. Can I have the full 5 minutes, please?
What?
May I have the full 5 minutes, please? Is that-
Different issue?
Yeah, before when he spoke, he was just
He was
speaking
talking on
to
the
the
motion,
motion.
on the motion.
Now it's the.
Right, I thought it was limited to that, so if I may. And it might not even take 5 minutes, but I do have some questions. Some of them may be familiar. Again, Charlie Cradaville, New Brunswick today. Has there been a court order regarding emergency ballots?
Yes.
And the order is to, retrieve them all and do what next?
To open the back of the machines.
Do we know how many emergency ballots there were cast? Not yet. Do you know when we'll know?
Judge has to grant the order first.
So
Oh.
there hasn't been an order.
There's been an
You're saying there's been a
application.
request.
There's been an action, but not an order from the judge. Gotcha. Do you know which judge is handling it yet?
I'm not quite sure.
Okay. For the record, on November 10th, I did email a request for the total number of provisionals in each election and the total number of cure letters in each election to the chief clerk and the administrator. Haven't gotten a response yet, so anything you can do to prompt that. I think that information is really important, should be transparent and available to anyone who wants it, because for the simple reason, it's the only way to know which races are still in play, which elections are too close to call or still, not a moot point to fight over the ballot. So I hope that I will send a follow-up email and hopefully get that soon. Brought with me a little stylus that folks got when they checked in on the ES&S machines. Can somebody tell me these were provided by ES&S, I presume?
Anybody?
Not sure.
I don't know.
Okay. Well, if they were the only piece of equipment that ES&S provided that didn't fail. These worked every time without fail. The same cannot be said of the multi-million-dollar expenditures on the electronic poll books and the electronic voting machines from ES&S. I think we really need to take a long, hard look at the equipment that was used, where it failed, why it failed, and actually come up with a new plan for the next election. I think that ES&S has not delivered what they promised. The county was sold a bill of goods and didn't get, actually got a whole mess of trouble because of that situation. I understand that there were other devices involved, including the routers that the state provided, but a router doesn't on its own, go to the internet and download data. It's the device that is plugged into the router that's responsible for that. There was no need at all for the poll books to be on the internet on election day because everyone has to vote at their assigned location. You just need the list for that district on the day of, and you don't need to keep checking the internet, the SVRS, on election day. And it's actually widely considered to be a huge vulnerability to hook up any election equipment to the internet. Yes, sir.
Correct. One, the router was directly connected to the SVRS. It didn't go through otherwise the internet. No, I'm not an expert in terms of that.
Okay.
And secondly, my understanding is that the router was necessary because the poll books had to be updated once in the morning to connect to the SVRS system, statewide voter registration system, for two reasons. One, so the record of who voted, early voting was on the machine, so people would not be able to vote again. And secondly, the people who got voted by mail ballots, which could have been up to 4 o'clock the day before election, was also on the machine, so they couldn't vote regular mail. Those were necessary requirements in order for this election to go forward. It was necessary.
Right.
Based on the election law that was put in place for this election. I have my own opinions about that, but that's not relevant at this point. It's that whether they should have been or whatever.
Yeah.
But the election law that was in place in this election required that connection.
Well, I think, based on what you're telling me is there had to, the data of who
35
is eligible to vote
He has 1,035,000 left.
needed
Then
to be somehow on the poll books between 4 p.m. on Monday and 6 a.m. on Tuesday. It didn't necessarily have to be done through, routers and Wi-Fi and all that, but I understand it did have to get that data once.
Okay.
That they did need to be on those machines once, but it didn't have to keep checking. It didn't have to keep going out there. And I can only surmise that the folks who made that device are responsible for it failing. And we haven't heard a word from ES&S. I've been asking their press people since the last screw up in the April election, and they've been totally dodgy, non-responsive, and I'm just concerned that we've given a lot of authority over our elections to an out-of-state company that doesn't have enough respect to even answer questions when they screw up. So I hope that at a future meeting, not only will all these things be discussed, but they'll be discussed with a representative of ES&S, with a representative of the county clerk's office, and with the state of New Jersey, who also bears responsibility for these huge, widespread election equipment failures. And I think that, to restore confidence in the elections, nothing short of that is going to do it. So I hope that, you'll make those invitations. You're in a position of power. You can invite those people to attend your meetings. And if they don't, that will speak volumes. So I hope that you'll make those invites, and we can actually have a full public discussion about what went wrong and what we're going to do to stop it from ever happening again. That's all for today. Thank you.
You don't have that list, do you?
Yes, what I have, I got it on the 6th from Tom.
I think that's updated now. No,
It's
that's
updated?
pretty sure. Yes, it has been updated. With,
There's another question.
okay,
Oh,
before-
I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Charlie,
Your name.
Your name.
Darcona, East Brunswick. I just wanted to add to what Charlie said. He made a lot of good points. I think as far as elections are concerned, we're all on the same page that they do need to work. And this is the first time that we're using these machines. I understand that there's going to be a couple of hiccups, but what we experienced was beyond a couple of hiccups. Amongst a bunch of things that Charlie pointed out, I would hope that I'm sure you guys are going to go through and really figure out all the things that went wrong. Among the things that I saw in East Brunswick were the fact that there were no paper provisional ballots at any location. They weren't even printed. I was on a call at 10:30 that morning where the clerk from her car told us that she was driving around, literally handing paper ballots to, she had just finished handing them to Edison, she was on her way to East Brunswick, and she was heading to other locations, and they were running around getting them printed. What provision was made, you know, what was the backup plan? It's quizzical to me that we're so heavily dependent on something brand new for the first time, that there was no backup plan. I heard people telling me that polls opened late in different locations. I don't know if that was East Brunswick specific or another area, but apart from poll books freezing, when I spoke, when I asked a question to the administrator about when the administrator had mentioned that they're advising all polling locations to turn off their router, I asked, how is this information being disseminated? And it's being disseminated through the town clerks. Now, East Brunswick has 14 polling locations, and our town clerk is great. She's absolutely fantastic, but it's difficult for her to communicate effectively to 14 different people or 14 different locations where there's 2 machines at every location. That's 28 machines. I mean, maybe it's just 14 routers, I'm not sure, but I think there's got to be a better plan of just quickly disseminating information. And I believe that was part of the machine itself. But again, there's no provision made for a backup plan if the machines don't work. We became so heavily reliant, and I'm not trying to put blame anywhere. You know, things happen. We need to identify what happened. We need to come up with a plan of action for them not to happen. And I'm just going through the list of things so it's on record for you guys to address in the future. There were poll staffing issues. One of the other questions that I know Chairman Benjavenga asked, and I commented on, and I know you guys don't have any control over it, but the fact that so many people were in line to vote early in the morning, they work in the city, they can't get back in time to extend the polling hours. And I know the judge said no. I don't know what other remedy there is, or if we can approach the great almighty New Jersey legislature and say, hey, are we really interested in disenfranchising voters? What's the big deal in keeping polls open for an extra 90 minutes? You know, just so that those coming back from the city who couldn't vote early in the morning, who wanted to, couldn't wait in line, you know, there was no other opportunity for them to vote. The other funny thing that I found was, I'm not going to say who, but somebody tried within the township, tried to reach out to the Board of Elections, but your phones aren't working. And phone calls aren't being picked up. And poll workers told me that if they had any problems, they were supposed to call the warehouse. And I believe there's 2 numbers to the warehouse, but you kept getting a busy signal. So here we are, poll workers, we got a voter, we're trying to service a customer, let's say, and we can't get the help that we need. I think we gotta think some of this through. Like Charlie said, we really gotta put our heads to this, and we gotta have this conversation, but I appreciate your time. Thank you.
I'm not gonna go stand over there, but Dave Herrera, I'm also from East Brunswick. There's a lot of good comments going on around the room, and I'm gonna kind of piggyback off what they said. You know, first and foremost, again, why the polling locations weren't open for an extra hour and a half when people did wait so long. I was getting phone calls. I also ran in the election. I'm a candidate who is also waiting for this molasses of a process to count provisional ballots almost 2 weeks after an election to figure out results. So it's frustrating. I have not slept in 2 weeks because my race is yet too close to call. And when we hear things like this gentleman was saying, even though he's from an opposite party, I agreed with him. There's a lot of errors that are going on. Ballots should be counted. Every legal vote should be counted. And that's why I think we can come together on that. But we're talking about we can't leave the polls open for an hour and a half when there has been admitted errors, when systems weren't working and people left. And we're saying, well, we can't extend it for an hour and a half. We're 2 weeks after the election, guys, and we still are counting votes. So what would it have been to leave the polling locations open for another hour to let people actually go and vote? We talk about disenfranchising, right? Like, I might be the youngest person in this room, and I can tell you right now, and this is no disrespect to anybody at this table, but I have almost zero faith in not only Middlesex, but in New Jersey as a whole in how elections are conducted anymore. Because we have these systems that are in place that just make people feel like, is it worth it to go out and vote? Do you know how many people we're seeing? Because again, I don't know how many of you are on Facebook, but by 9 o'clock in the morning, there was about 40 posts of people saying lines were too long, machines were down, this is going on. Now, somebody like me, obviously I went and voted because it was the first time in my life I could go punch a ballot for myself. But if I wasn't that excited about Jack or Murphy and I was on the fence about going to vote, and I saw that there's hour-and-a-half long lines, I'm just going to cut my losses and go about my day and not vote. So we talk about races, like he was saying, there's maybe what, I think you said a couple hundred votes in between, and he wants to count those provisionals. Same thing for me. Mathematically, I'm still in the race. Am I down? Absolutely. But am I conceding? Absolutely not. But we're talking about when you have elections that are within handfuls of votes, and then you can literally cite dozens and dozens and hundreds of people, not in just Middlesex, but statewide, that decided to stay home because they don't trust what's going on here, that's a problem. That's a problem. And I'm not here to say vote by mail is the problem, but we also need to understand vote by mails go out weeks before the election. There needs to be something after this election that needs to be put in place that says if you are going to vote by mail, then your vote by mail needs to be in at a certain point so it can be opened and received on election day. I don't care if you're and I understand that Democrats are the ones that typically vote by mail. Go ahead, vote by mail, but you need to have your vote in a box, and it needs to be counted on November 2nd. We shouldn't say, hey, our race is this close, and then the next day there's more, and then there's more, and then there's more. Because you know what? People aren't paying attention after Election Day. People go to bed, and they wake up, and they go, where did all these votes come from? And I'm not here, this is not a conspiracy at all. I'm just saying I'm speaking from the younger generation, the people that are going to run for office, the people that are going to pick up, once you guys all step down, right, and pick up your commission seats, that we don't have faith in what goes on in this building here. We don't have faith in what goes on at a state level. And this is not a party issue. This is people issues. And you guys tested out equipment during a general election. Equipment that had never been tested before. During a general election, when we're coming out of one of the most insane times in New Jersey in American history, a pandemic where everything is polarized. Are you about masks? Are you about vaccine? Are you about whatever you're about? It's the most polarizing time to live in America. And we tested equipment that in a general election, not during the primary, during the general election. We had problems that I don't think anybody here or at any level is answering for. And you know what, and I apologize if my tone seems a little upset, but you can imagine how I feel as a candidate, as somebody who went out and knocked on doors for 9 months and talked to people and tried to get out the vote to see that, well, this vote's not going to be counted, or this, and then you hear things like, oh, provisional ballots might get thrown out. And when I hear that I'm down by X number of votes, but there are more provisional ballots that are being counted right now upstairs, I'm questioning who's looking at these votes. Are they throwing them out? Are they counting them? I don't care who they're for. I just want to make sure every vote up there that's legal is counted, just like what the guy over here said. And it's something that I think you guys need to look into. And if you don't have the power to do that, then I'd like for somebody to point me in the direction, because as you can see, I don't have any problem talking to anybody. So point me in the direction of who needs to hear this. Because I think as a whole, this is something we need to work on. And this is, again, I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican, but I think people on both sides are pretty fed up with the way elections are run. And people are losing faith. And if that's the way we want to go, then that's fine. You don't need to come here and sit in a room with nobody but yourselves and talk about issues. We need to get people involved, right? So I'm sorry that I'm upset, but I hope that you guys, and I hear the timer, I hope you guys understand that this is not,
Your time is
I heard you, but I hope you understand that this is something that you need to take very seriously.
Get 2 minutes more if you want to take it.
I'll take it, why not? I got nothing but time. I left work for this. I have had an eye twitch for the last 2 weeks because every day the votes go up, I have a party that's already claimed victory when mathematically, like my man said, it's not over. It's not over. But you have people that feel disenfranchised, right? And I know that's a talking point from one side of the aisle that one party wants to disenfranchise, but I think people as a whole feel disenfranchised. Right? Even as a candidate, I didn't even want to go vote. When I had to run around to polling locations, when you had polling locations in East Brunswick where you had 2 machines in some of the heaviest voter districts And they were backed up. We had poll workers, I don't know if you've heard this, there was poll workers that didn't even get to take a break all day. They worked from 6 a.m. all the way until 8 p.m. and they didn't even get a chance to take a break to have coffee because they were running around like chickens with no heads. We had people that couldn't vote, like you said, because they had to go to work. And now I honestly believe this late vote by mail stuff, you guys got to figure that out. You got to figure that out. They get sent by the mail, which in my opinion encourages lazy votes, okay? How many people vote by mail? They don't even know who the hell's on the ballot. They just vote the party line, and they send it in, right? Maybe I'm young. Look, I'm not politically correct. I call myself not your typical politician because I think all politicians are garbage, and we should replace them, which is why I ran. 31-year-old guy. I have no business in this world, but the reality is the people we've elected have let us down. And I hope that the people who ever elected you guys, you don't let us down either. Thank you.
I think we need to explain some.
Yeah.
Don, do you want to do it?
Yeah, well, a lot of these things, I hope we will discuss at a regular meeting, because there's a lot of things we have to correct. There's three things I want to say based in response to, just so you're aware. One, we're an administrative agency, the Board of Elections is an administrative agency. We have no power to extend voting hours.
I wasn't blaming you.
No,
I was only expressing.
No, I understand, and this would require a court order. They went to court, the judge decided against it. So that's what, it's not our thing, that part of it. Secondly, the similar situation in terms of accepting vote by mail ballots for a week after election, that's also a state law. So you have to change the legislature, or have the legislature that's there has to vote differently to change that. Once again, we are administering what we have to administer. And the third part, which is probably the most frustrating, is that the early voting and the use, which required the use of these electronic poll books, etc.
Was perfect.
No, it wasn't. It was passed. It was passed beginning of the year, and the election officials told the elected officials, that there's not enough time to properly put all of the stuff in place and test it for November. There's not. And it turned out that it wasn't. But it was passed anyway, and the timing was not changed. They were requested to do that. They were told it was going to be a problem because there was the first time the electronic poll books were used, as you know, was in this November election. There was no time, there was no, even though they were requested to do this, there was plenty of ways otherwise to do it. It could be a pilot project to see how this would work. It could be started in a primary election with less turnout. There's lots of different things. Election officials said it was a problem, and it would be a real big problem, and the legislature said, we don't care, we're passing it and putting it in effect for now. So if you disagree with that, and I disagree with that personally, but that's a personal opinion, that's not a board opinion or anything else, it's something that the legislature and the governor would have to change. We have to administer what we got. Even though they were told it was going to be a problem. That's all.
When you get a chance, I mean, that
Any further comments from
the
anyone?
one that somebody told me.
We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call, Lily.
Chairman Egley. Commissioner Frankel.
Yes.
Commissioner Katz.
Yes.
Commissioner Moskowitz.
Yes.
Commissioner Jello.
Yes.